Thank you, guys. Thank you to our friends that listen up. Appreciate it. The next talk will be around creative approach to growth hacking. And who better to talk today than Saracoglu? I apologize if I mispronounced that again. He was on stage earlier, but just a couple of words. He started his career in marketing in the Bosch Company back in the late 90s. Disrupted things a little bit there for a little while, then did your MBA in CAS in London. Did consulting for a few years, then started your first company, which was Litespell in 2003. Worked with brands such as Gillette, Duracell, Head & Shoulders, Milka, Honda, Red Bull, Nokia, Microsoft, a bunch of companies.
Absolutely.
Didn't stop there, obviously. Now you started another company in 2013 called String Ventures. So perfect person to talk about growth. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm sort of had exposure to both startups and also worked with some of the leading advertisers, some of the leading brand owners in the world like Coca-Cola, L'Oreal, Procter & Gamble. And I believe some of this knowledge is quite transferable to the startup world. We have this divide between, left side of brain and right side, but in reality, right side is not that crazy. I mean, creative agencies use some tools, some frameworks, some approach angles to create those adverts, and you can be inspired from that as well. Now with the startup world, I see what we do is like during the minimum viable products validation phase, what we have is like an unfinished car. We have tires, we have a chassis, we have the engine, but we do not have the seats, the windshield, the air conditioning and all that. This is more than enough to try to validate a product. And what we do is, as we engage the consumer, engage the user, we do product iterations, and we improve our product. We add features, we add new modules, and all that. And then suddenly we come to a conclusion that, hey, we found a product market fit, and now it's time to grow. And growth is all about, fine-tuning the engine of this startup. And we do so by increasing desire and reducing friction as much as possible. So, but even in the early stage of a startup, I think some very key elements are missing because I got exposed to several startups on demo days and all that kind of stuff, or doing one-to-one interviews. And if those critical elements are missing, then your proposition doesn't really make sense. And first of all, what's missing? I think you should first tell a compelling story. You should tell a compelling story to your audience. It can be your customer, it can be the investor, and you're basically telling the same story, but in different ways. And there are some tools to tell more effective stories. Now, a solution is a combination of a situation, a complication, a question, and an answer. We call this SCQA framework. It's been defined by Barbara Minto, and I suggest that you take the note and buy her book, The Pyramid Principle, and she explains in the first 7 chapters the way of her SCQA framework. And this is the minimum structure for storytelling. I mean, by reading that book, you won't be able to write novels like Tolstoy, or you won't be able to direct films like Stanley Kubrick, but you will make sense in the face of your consumer in your landing page, or while you're pitching to an investor. You will be more interesting and more engaging. Now, in the classical story pattern, we have a happy situation, and then some disturbing complication occurs, and that triggers a question, hey, what am I going to do now? And then hero finds the answer, hero finds the solution. Now, to give an example, let's say this is my flat. I have beautiful white walls. Then I become a father, and my daughter grows up, and she plays with her paints, and she turns my walls into a mess. Now, what's the situation? Living room walls were nice and clean. My daughter turned them into a mess. That is the complication. And the question is, what am I going to do now? The answer is, I can hire a painter, or I can go to a DIY store. I can buy a white paint and paint it by myself. That's the minimum structure of a story, telling a story. But bear in mind, situation is the nearest equilibrium state. I'll just refer to that later on. And complication is the status quo shaking events. I mean, this can be, the increasing popularity of smartphones. This can be related with changes in legislation, regulations. This can be about Bulgaria entering European Union, whatever you name it. But there is something, there was an equilibrium state in the past, and something happened, and that state has been changed. And this change naturally flows a question and answer. Okay, we are in the European Union, what are we going to do now about transport or whatever you name it? And essentially, your product should be the answer of that story. What are we going to do now? Hey, use my product, use my software, use my hardware, wearable, or whatever you name it. But I was back in Istanbul mentoring startups for a demo day. I suggest that don't do Earth was just a gas cloud and cosmic dust type of story. This is by meaning the situation is always the most recent equilibrium state. I mean, we had one startup that was developing a weather application, and that guy on the stage had 3 very precious minutes to explain his application, and he spent 2.5 minutes of that explaining us global warming. But, I mean, we know about global warming for the last 20 years, let's say. Or there was another startup from Ukraine, and they came up with this very bold proposition, hey, we are going to change the sort of the hotel industry, hotels and hospitality industry. And when I heard that, hey, I think these guys found a solution for the Airbnb. I mean, Airbnb is kicking the asses of hotels and motels and all that stuff. So that's the recent equilibrium state. Airbnb come up, and that industry has been really disturbed, really shaken. But no, he was saying that mobile phones, everybody is using a mobile phone. Okay, we know that for the last 10 years. So please don't go too back, because otherwise you lose interest of your audience. You should start with the previous equilibrium state. And this is actually the SCQ analysis. You start with the question, because this is your product. You think, hey, I've found a solution for that problem. Okay, but what happened at this problem? What was missing in the past that problem wasn't applicable? So you should go and verify and iterate your story to be more understandable. Honestly speaking, I think storytelling is the first validation step. I mean, you have an idea, you tell it to your friend, you tell it to your friends, and if they don't get it, if they don't see the brightness of the idea, that means either you don't have a startup idea, or you're not doing a good job about explaining your idea. So you should go back and study the story structure. If you master this, then you can also play with your storytelling. I mean, you can make a standard sort of story that makes about awareness, telling people for the first time. But then if you have a slight awareness about the product and its story, then you can change the structure and you can make it more direct. You can play with that. And you can play with that, with this message, through your funnel as well. I mean, for the first steps, unaware and aware, that's all the standard story. I mean, situation, complication, question, and answer. But if you want a repeat purchase, for instance, you can start with a direct message as well. So I suggest that you buy the book. I mean, we have very limited time, and it's not possible for to explain you without really trying and practicing the methodology up there. But it's really useful. I mean, even if you're the most left-handed guy, even if you're a pure engineer, you can write sort of a sound and interesting, compelling story. And by telling a compelling story, it's important that people can relate with that. And for that relation, we use metaphors. By metaphors, we mean that elements of your product reminds people something else, and that they can apply their experiences about that, and it's more easily understandable. By meaning that, what I'm trying to say is like this is, sorry, This is one of the fashion search engines in Turkey. And in their sort of landing page, in their homepage, they say Turkey's fashion and shopping search engine. Because consumers are used to search engines. They're aware of that offering. And yet, when they're pitching to investors, they're essentially telling the same story, but in a different way. When they're pitching to investors, they say, Google for fashion, or fashion for Google, that kind of stuff. They make the relation with Google, so it's much more easily understandable, comprehensible. Now we have a bunch of, for instance, new offerings like, after the success of Airbnb, Airbnb for boats, Airbnb for cars, and all that stuff. But I think it's much better if you can sort of relate with those metaphors, much sort of understand them. That touches to the emotions of the people or their previous experiences more. A very good example is USB condom. What it does is simply, when you're transferring your data, it protects your privacy. It protects your data privacy, it protects you from viruses and all that stuff. And initially, now their name is SyncStop, but their first name was USB condom, and it's a very strong metaphor. I mean, you don't really have to spend 3 minutes to explain its uses and all that stuff. All you do is get a USB port, put a condom on it, take a photo, put on your landing page, you have a story. You have a compelling story, and people can relate with that easily. Now, telling about the stories, most of the startups that I come across, they have a unique value proposition. That's fine. Hopefully, you must have a unique value proposition. But while communicating this with your customer, with consumer or investor, you're supposed to have a unique selling proposition based on that unique value proposition. And this is sort of the inventor of the definition of unique selling proposition, Rosser Reeves, a big ad guy from the 50s and 60s. And he says every brand has some unique elements in that, and turning this by explaining its benefit to the customer is about telling the unique elements that differentiates your product from the others. So essentially, unique value proposition is about features and capabilities of your product. And unique selling propositions is more about the benefit. It's like, I have a watch. Okay, fine. So what? What about me? I can tell you the time. I can tell you the time to go to bed. I can wake you up in the morning. Okay, these are the benefits. These matters to me. So it's very important to carry these. So in a sense, unique selling proposition puts the elements of value proposition into an element that consumer can understand, relate, and see the benefits for him or her. And with the copy, we take unique selling proposition and make changes. We do several A/B tests on our landing pages. And what we do is we change different headlines, we use different sub-ads, we see their performances, we see which one performs better than the other. And with copy, you can play with that. With copy and also with an image, you can tell your unique selling proposition in different ways. But generally, products have more than one benefit. So you should also check the alternative benefits and see which matters most for your customer. Okay, giving a simple and more comprehensible explanation. Let's say I'm a pharma company in the early 20th centuries, and in 1900s, I founded the way of extracting vitamin C from natural resources and managed to put that into a capsule. So my unique value proposition is I can give human body's daily need of vitamin C in a small capsule. So my unique selling proposition is the most convenient way for people, because people can get that vitamin C by eating oranges, lemons, and all that stuff. My unique selling proposition is the most convenient way of getting that daily dosage of vitamin C. And when I turn this into a copy, I can try it like that. Hey, this pill packs the power of 5 lemons in one small package. So this is how this transition works. And you're supposed to make several iterations through that, honestly. This is really important. The way you tell your story, the way you define your value proposition, the way you explain the benefits, if the benefits are more than one, the way to identify which matters more to the customer, you should do significant amount of iterations. And this is Bernbach's famous advertisement about Volkswagen. It says think small. It's actually, this is elected as the best advertising piece of the 20th century. It's about advertising Volkswagen cars, Volkswagen Beetle to the American audience, which, they think big is better and all that stuff. But he's challenged that notion, and he's putting a smaller version of his small car, and he says think small, and explains the benefits of small, like you will, consume less gas and all that stuff. And now, branding is much, much more sophisticated because we have too many alternatives. Like this is Volkswagen Touareg's advert. They put a goat and they shaved it like the puppy of Paris Hilton, and they say that it's, it's four-wheel drives, good on every terrain, and also it's luxuries. It's also posh. That kind of information. But for startups, we don't need to get into brand positioning because hopefully we have a unique product. And it has some alternatives, but not exactly these alternatives are approaching from the same angle. So we do not need such a sophisticated ways because we're not marketing a commoditized thing. So we can use a more straightforward copy. If you define your unique selling proposition properly, you can just put it on your website, and then you can, try to check it with more emotional wording or emotional sort of photography, but still it will do fine if you define it well. This is, for instance, the sort of the unique selling proposition, the mottos, the slogans of the social networks in year 2008. And the other platforms like MySpace, High5, and Bebo was more slogan-like. They did not explain their product. And they also had kind of commoditized products. Like, you can get a nickname, you can be there, you can interact and meet with new people, that kind of offering. But Facebook did something different. Facebook said, hey, I'm just a tool, and I'm offering you to get connected with real people that you know in your real life. And they explained it in a more explanatory tagline. Now, when the awareness is low, an explanatory tagline prevails. And this is one of the reasons they that succeeded. And they, of course, refined their copy in time. I mean, Twitter refined its copy in time. You'll always try to refine. During the time, as your awareness increases, you can go for shorter versions of the copy. But initially, it's good to start with an explanatory tagline. On your landing page, you have only 8 seconds to, pitch your product to the consumer, to the visitor. Within 8 seconds, if they don't understand what you're offering, they just shut down their browser and move to somewhere else. And unique selling proposition is a combination of the key visual, your headline, subhead, call to action button, and everything. So you write it down and try different iterations, A/B tests, with different visuals, different copies, and all that. A very good example, in my opinion, is a pocket. It says when you find something you want to later, put it in your pocket. And, the visual gives you the idea, the sort of joy of reading something with a nice cup of coffee. So it just tells it about that very easily, very sort of compellingly. So I'll just go to the ways to use, the ways that digital creative agencies use social media, because it's the most influential medium in the world. Human media is the most influential medium in the world. I mean, this is the types of media. We have owned media, which is our website, Facebook page, Twitter account, and all that. Then we have paid media, billboards, Facebook AdWords, Google AdWords, and all that. We can do PR. And also there is this new notion called native advertising. Native advertising is something that people are marketing your product for their friends and all that stuff because they love your product. And that's the best way of advertising. I mean, this is, for instance, the platforms for Jawbone. And, a friend of mine on Instagram, shared her photo with the new red Jawbone wearable. And, she also shared it with different sets of jewelry and all that stuff. And we got exposed to that. So that's the best way of branding in the new world. So to be able to leverage the social media, first of all, you should create a hero. You know, in the storytelling SUK analysis, we said, you know, the problem comes, and a hero comes up and solves this problem. So your product is essentially the hero. So if we go to the situation complication analysis, let's say we were flying from New York to Paris at 5,000 feet. Then the plane's engine stopped. What should we do? We should call Superman, for instance. Or your product replaces that. Your product should be in the replacement of that. So your product or brand identity is the hero. A good way to think and visualize this is like if you have this magic wand, and if you touched your product, if your product turned into a human, what kind of a human would it be? Like, would it be a 20-something young professional? Would it be something like in his 40s, a consultant? That type of stuff. You should try to sort of make it real. And also, when you see the profile, when he or she speaks with you, he or she will speak with you in a different way. Maybe more friendly way, maybe more experienced way, but you should also pick a tone of voice. A very good example for that is Sebastian. It's like, it's a startup from Turkey. It's an application about, you know, providing young professionals which have very limited tight times during lunch times. Istanbul is a very big city, and when you have something like an hour, and you go and you stay in the queue, wait in the queue and all that stuff. If you use Sebastian application, you can pre-order your food and all that. And what they did is they, in the social media, created a character which is very much like a very friendly, very hospitable chef. And you know, they just begin conversations with the consumer. They waited during lunch times, then they checked the tweets by their search engine, and then through Twitter, they asked people to use the application, how they feel, and all that stuff. And it was really, it was like, Sebastian was like a real person, not a product, not a mobile application, but a real person who can solve their problems. And once we created a hero, set a tone of voice, then we can approach social media from different angles. These angles differ from startup to startup. One is, this is when I was running Publicis Modem Istanbul. This is the framework that we developed up there. One is igniting the conversation, starting a conversation out of nothing. The other way is, there is a conversation already going on the internet, on the forums, social media, and so on. You can own that conversation for your benefit. Or you can subvert the conversation. You can change the tone, or your customer may not be the one who is controlling the purchasing decision. I'll give you an example to that. Or the hardest one maybe is like confronting the conversation, like a taboo. Let's start with igniting the conversation. This is very good for products who have really disruptive capabilities. If you have a truly innovative product, it's always good to try to ignite the conversation. This is the startup that we sent to Y Combinator, helped them enter Y Combinator. They're trying to disrupt the furniture buying behavior. They have this hardware tool bundled with the software, and when they project it to the furniture, you can change the fabric, you can change the sort of design and all that stuff. And if I don't tell you that there's a projector, you think that it's real. So they had so much sort of uniqueness in their offering, so it's ignited a conversation. And they just seeded that conversation. Another one is another startup from Turkey. You can, integrate your Instagram account and get posters and all that stuff. And there's a huge bunch of competitors for them all around the world. Instaprint and all that stuff. Too many competitors. But what they did is they accidentally find out that, especially mothers are very interested in that for their kids' photos. An Australian mother found the company, found the website, and published on their blog post. So what they tried to do is they tried to own sort of the conversation about, mother, children, kids, and all that stuff. That they focused on that conversation and created enormous traffic. And subverting the conversation, this is valid if your product, you're offering something, but your customer is not that interested in your offering. Like Idemama is a startup in Turkey. What they do is They're like a marketplace. I have a small or medium company. I go there. I need a new logo. I need a new corporate identity. I can find the designers. I can open sort of a requirement, and designers can submit their proposals and all that stuff. It's working fine, but they also want to go to sort of rural Turkey, Anatolia, companies up there. But it's really hard to sort of, the average small to medium-sized enterprise owner in Turkey is not that interested in design. But they're very much interested in local football clubs, because these people are, wannabes in those local football clubs and all that stuff. And we suggested them, you can go and sort of make a logo application for those football clubs, and people can interact, because they really have crap logos, by the way, and people, designers can do it. So you will have sort of significant visibility on social media, we said. And another way of subverting the conversation is like your customer is, if there is another group has influence over your customer, then you would want to reach to that influential group. By meaning that, let me give you an example. There was this startup who came with the idea of a safe vehicle platform. You put a camera, and then on real time, it sort of surveys and supervises the actions of the driver. And this is perfect for kids services, buses that carries kids all around the city and all that. So the parents could force the service owners, hey, I want my kid to be going to school with this device in your bus. So it's like subverting the conversation. This is sort of like a very applicable model if you're trying to sort of make women buy electronic stuff, make mothers buy electronic stuff, because the buying decision is being done by the fathers. But if you can convince mothers that they should buy this device, this safety or security device, then they force the father to go and buy. And the final one is confronting the conversation. This is Düğün.com, is Wedding.com, a Turkish startup, and approximately 1/3 of all weddings are being arranged through this platform. You can find photographers, you can, reserve venues and all that stuff. And what they did is, they wanted to create sort of more traffic, and they used their own data. And they had some interesting data. They said, for instance, out of 10 weddings, the sort of bride's mother cries in the wedding. Out of 10 weddings, 2 people, get really upset, or there is a fight, or something like that. So they give this data and say that, hey, weddings are not that sort of miraculous or perfect or frictionless events. There are some serious stuff going on weddings. The content is interesting, and it's also highlighting the needs of a platform to make everything, to plan everything to go much in a better way to plan your wedding. So igniting the conversation is good for truly innovative products, or good for products with a design hook inside them. A very interesting game, for instance. It's good for igniting conversation. Owning the conversation is good for if there is already a need for your product. If there is already sort of people are seeking solutions on forums, on social media, and so on. And confronting the conversation is good if you're attracting, going to a taboo. Hey, weddings are not that great. They have problems. They have serious problems in weddings. You should come and use our platform to plan it properly. And subverting the conversation is good for if your customer group has influence on some other party, or if your product area is not that interesting. So just like sponsorships, you can sort of own a category, like football clubs, local football clubs. So growth hacking is building a sustainable and automated growth engine. And there are some growth tactics, but related ones with us today. The best one of them, best of all, is the product viralization, meaning you have some elements in your product that makes it viral. It's the Hotmail example, for instance, Tim Draper invested in Hotmail, and when the team come up first, Tim Draper asked them, hey, how are you going to market this? Okay, great product. I totally understand it, but how will you make people use it? How will you sort of reach the masses? And they said, hey, we go to sort of be advertised on the billboards and all that. And actually it was Tim Draper's idea to, hey, why don't you put sort of a message, get your free email at Hotmail type of message. So when people are sending emails, we add some virality to the product. And he said so because he didn't want them to spend so much on unnecessary advertising. And we have the Dropbox example. But the thing is, Dropbox and Hotmail are, even these are really, really best practices. These are inherently viral products because they're about sharing stuff, like sending an email about sharing, or sending a file is about sharing as well. But some products are not. I mean, with some startups, we see really big challenge about viralization issues. So inbound marketing in that sense might be a good solution. And by that we mean, blog posts, infographics, and videos, and viral videos if possible. If you can create brilliant creative content, then the algorithms of Google, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever you name it, are working for you. And even if you're not dealing with them, they're counting up. Once you get this viral sort of critical point, then it moves like a snowball, and even months later they get traffic to you. So it's good to have explainer videos, but it's also much better to make them a bit viral, I would say. So with explainer videos, we have live action videos. I want to put some effort onto these categories. Live action videos are actually good for hardware products or people-oriented services. By people-oriented service, I mean Airbnb or Uber kind of service. And animated videos are actually good for truly abstract stuff. Like, you can't visualize them. You can't use live action. It's like, a very secure hosting solution, let's say. You can't get people. The animation is the best way to understand it. And they have, pros and cons in their own respect. Live action videos are good for, creating tension, desire, and action, because you can do a more emotional stuff with that. And but on the downside, they're very hard to edit. You should plan them very carefully, because once you have a live action video, you have the film, the film has been shot. You can't really re-edit it that easily. So animated videos are really good for iterations, for improvements, and all that. For script writing, I suggest some tips and tricks. I suggest that you write the initial script yourself, because tech products are generally hard to grasp, and it's really hard for copywriters to understand them. So we suggest our startups write their video script by themselves, then give it to a copywriter, and the copywriter re-edits it after they write. Keep them brief. Keep them maximum 90 seconds, but within the first 30 seconds, you're supposed to share the unique benefits of your product. I mean, don't build such a long story and, hey, I'll hide my sort of product and unleash it at the last minute. That's not the way, because 90 seconds is a long engagement time, and you should keep people really interested. So you should tell about your product briefly in the 30 seconds, then build up your story, and don't go more than 90 seconds, I would say. Always speak in the second person. You and your, that kind of stuff. And as I told you about the storytelling or unique selling proposition, the tagline, I told you that explanatory tagline is better. It's also better to use a simple language in your videos if the awareness about your solution is low. And while speaking on the video, refer to your hero, how your hero would speak if he or she was a person in real life. How would he or she would speak? Just try to imagine. And if you can, try to touch a sense of humor, I would say. For creative execution, I also suggest startups, but for startups who have a bit of funding, let's say, and with that bit of funding, you can buy AdWords, you can buy Facebook ads, you can buy displays and all that thing, and you sort of create a marketing plan. But in the meantime, I suggest that you go and brief 2 or 3 creative agencies and let them work for you. And when they debrief you, when they present their ideas to you, check if the idea is really good and has viral potential, then switch your marketing spending and give them to spend it on this creative idea, I would say. If it's a crap idea, then spend it on the paid advertising. But if not, I mean, you should be very sort of flexible in that sense. Because in our region, we are advantages. We have too many, bright, newly found creative digital agencies, and they want to show themselves. And with startups, you can be very brave. And with most of the brands, existing established brands, they're not able to be that brave. So there is a good match, and I suggest that you leverage that opportunity. And for that purpose, for instance, one of the best explainer videos, Dollar Shave Club, it's probably much more than 20 million views now. It's a brilliantly shot production. I suggest that. It's not an expensive production, but it's really fun to watch. And it's, on YouTube. New users are watching, so YouTube is promoting up, and Google is promoting up. And finally, I suggest that you try media agnostic, because when we speak of growth hacking and all that, inherently we think about digital platforms, leveraging them, finding ways. But you can be creative in using. I mean, you should think about the context. In which context the consumer or the customer will use my product? One of the most, brilliant growth hacking tricks that I've seen is the Evernote stickers. It's like they noticed that this trend that, while we are in a meeting, some people are checking their emails and all that stuff, and it might be sort of offensive for the speaker. So if you, put Evernote sticker, hey, I'm not being rude, I'm just taking this meeting's note on my computer or on my tablet. So people, they distributed the stickers all around, when the sort of plazas, where the companies are, and people stick to them, used it up. And it's a brilliant way to spread the word. And Evernote is a productivity tool, so it's very applicable for young professionals. And they penetrated that audience with a very, very viral tool. And every day, that sticker stayed. They got exposure to new customers, or they got repeat exposure to the previous customers. So this is my slide deck. Do you have questions? I'm more than happy to answer them.
I think we're a little short on time.
Okay.
But we appreciate, and it's a great lecture. Thank you so much.
Thank you.